It's been 93 days since my sea kayak was last on the water. That's a quarter of a year. In that time, I've really missed the sea. I've missed everything about it. I've missed the sounds, I've missed the sights, I've missed the smells, I've even missed the taste of it. So with lockdown restrictions being lifted slightly, we thought it would be a fantastic opportunity to get out and do a gentle little paddle. We planned like a nice, easy, simple paddle first time back on the water, just from South Shields down to Marsden, having lunch at Marsden Rock and then just heading back up. The weather turned out to be fantastic. It was a really hot day for March, maybe 18, 19 degrees. There was a light offshore wind, force 3, gusting force 4. And it was just beautifully calm. The sea was lovely and still. It was actually the biggest spring tide of the year. And when we paddled down, it was just after low water. So as we set off south, the coastline looked pretty different to what it normally does. It's a paddle we've done a lot of times, but it looked really dry. Seeing new rock formations that you just wouldn't normally see, so that made it a little bit more interesting. Anyway, so we made it to Marsden in next to no time at all. So we just paddled on south, just seeing how far we got before we got a bit hungry and wanted to stop for some lunch really. We paddled on south past Souter Lighthouse, and because the tide was so low, we actually managed to see a couple of different wrecks that I've never seen before in that area. This stretch of coastline was particularly treacherous in the past, and it actually has the most number of shipwrecks per mile of anywhere in the British Islands. Something like 44 shipwrecks per mile, and the second on the list is Godwin Sands down at 32 per mile. So it's way above there in terms of the number of wrecks that you've got in the area. The building of Souter Lighthouse was a consequence of this, and strangely, it had something to do with reports of false lights in the area known as the Durham false lights. There were numerous reports of wrecked boats that had mistaken the Whitburn area for the mouth of the Tyne, saying that they'd seen two lights which resembled very closely the piers at Tynemouth. So they started heading for land, and before they knew it, they were wrecked on Whitburn Steel. There was actually a number of investigations into this, but nothing was ever found that could definitively prove what these lights were. Anyway, after I think 20 boats were wrecked in 1869, it was decided to build a permanent light there, and that's why Souter Lighthouse was built. So although it's probably not officially the reason, it may be the first lighthouse or the only lighthouse on Earth that's being built because of unknown aerial phenomenon in terms of lights and bad weather. It's also definitely the first lighthouse that was built specifically to use electricity and was powered by electricity. We had a nice little paddle and we made it as far south as Seaburn Beach, so the north of Seaburn, so essentially Sunderland. Before we stopped for lunch, had to pick our way through the rocks to get to the beach because the tide was so low at that point. On our way back up, we had a lovely paddle. It was like somebody had turned the tap back on, because all of these, you know, huge rock formations that we were passing on the way down, they just weren't there anymore, and we were actually able to paddle over a lot of them. Made it through the Needle at Souter Lighthouse, which was high and dry just before when we paddled past it.
Flowing through, yeah, like it. Woo!
This wasn't an epic paddle or a big paddle by any stretch of the imagination. It was just a nice, easy paddle to get some miles back in the arms, really. But I really can't describe how good it felt to be back at sea, to just be out there. I don't know if it's just me, but when I'm out there, all of the stresses and the complexities of life just seem to melt away a little bit. You know, you're kind of out there and you're only concerned with, you know, the tide, the weather, and the sea condition. And don't get me wrong, those things can be quite complex, and their interactions can certainly be complex at times. But there is just a simplicity about it that is hard to find in other areas of life at times. So yeah, just being on the water in the boat, it just really does help to clear my mind and just to help de-stress. And it doesn't matter if it's, you know, just a day or even just a few hours. Just to get out there and just have that escape is fantastic. Yeah. And we're so lucky that we live close enough to a marvellous stretch of coastline to be able to do that. Anyway, looking forward to doing a lot more paddles like that, and to go maybe a bit further afield when things open up. And who knows, maybe even be lucky enough to pack the boat up and go on a little expedition or two.